Welcome to Faith, Love, and Therapy, a podcast to encourage and inspire. I'm your host, Jamie Johnson, a licensed clinical social worker working in the field of mental health for the last 10 plus years. I am committed to mental and spiritual wellness. Thank you for joining me as we peel back the layers of mental health from a faith perspective. I welcome you all back to another episode. This is episode 48, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the silent treatment. And I wanted to share kind of an experience that I had with a client. And so I just want to focus on like when we use silence, right? When silence isn't golden. We hear that, silence is important. Silence can be used, but silence can also be used in ways that aren't productive. So I had an experience with a client who has a teenage daughter. And my client she is a chronic people pleaser. She's super mom. She's like, get it done by any means necessary. She is go above and beyond for my children. She's that mom. She's a phenomenal mother. And she struggles with resting. She struggles with saying no. She struggles with not being able to show up in a way that she wants to show up for her children, for her family in general. And so she shared with me that she had been frustrated with her daughter and just feeling that her daughter was expressing a lack of gratitude for a lot of the sacrifice in her time and in rearranging her schedule in order to meet some of her daughter's needs. And her daughter is involved in different things and working now. And so mom is trying to do all that she can in order to balance that and to make sure that her daughter doesn't miss out on anything. And so she was expressing some frustration in one of her sessions, and she said that her daughter had responded to her in a way that made her feel upset. And so she stopped talking to her daughter. And she felt very justified. She felt, that's what I needed to do. I stopped talking to her. I didn't talk to her for 3 days. And I said, okay, can I ask a few questions? And she said, sure. And so I began asking her questions, and one of the questions I asked was, what did you gain by not talking to her? And she said, well, she knew I was upset. Okay. I said, did it change anything? Did it change anything between the two of you? Did it change anything about what happened? And she said, no. And so we sat with that for a minute. Okay. So what did you lose? And she said, what do you mean? I said, well, what did you lose from not talking to her? And she was like, well, I didn't talk. We didn't talk for 3 days. I said, so you lost 3 days of time with your daughter, communication with your daughter. And she kind of looked at me and I looked at her, and she kind of looked away and she said, yeah, I did. And I said, well, was it worth it? Was it worth losing those 3 days of not engaging with your daughter? And they have a pretty solid relationship, right? So I knew that would be a concern for her. I know that that's important to her. And when I asked her, was it worth it? She, of course, said no. She said no, it wasn't worth losing those 3 days of relationship time with her daughter. And so we talked about that more. And I said, well, what was the reason why? Why were you not talking to her? And she said, I was upset. And I said, okay, what does that mean? What do you mean you were upset? And she said she didn't consider me and she was ungrateful. And I said, so, okay, so she sounds like she hurt your feelings. She said, yes. And I asked her, well, why didn't you just say that? And she said, I don't like to say that. I said, you don't like to say what? I'm hurt. My feelings are hurt. I don't like saying things like that. And I said, well, why? She said, that's weak. And we paused. And this is where silence is good because it allows people to contemplate what they've just said. And she kind of looked at me and I said, okay. And I wanted to kind of dive into that because we had more of a dialogue about what that meant and where that came from. Why is admitting that your feelings are hurt or that your child has done something that hurts you, why is that weak? And so I was talking to her about the fact that it appeared that she was using silence more as a punishment. And what people don't realize is silence used as a punishment can cause more damage than they really think. It sends the message to people that they are disposable, right? It sends the message to people that you don't care. And typically when it's used, that is not the intent behind it. But it doesn't matter what the intent is. The message is different and hurts those that the punishment is applied to, right? And so people are left thinking you don't care, that they're disposable. And please know, y'all know if you've listened to the show for any amount of time, that I am an advocate for getting your thoughts together, taking a bit of time before you respond when something is affecting you, right? I am an advocate for that. But I'm an advocate for you saying that that's what you need. I'm an advocate for you being able to express the thought that I need some time because I'm upset or I'm frustrated or I'm bothered, whatever adjective you'd like to use. But letting people know I need some time, but we're going to talk about this, right? The idea of being emotional or sensitive as a weakness is very problematic. When people use your emotions against you, you develop that kind of mindset that I can't be honest about what I feel. And so she was clearly experiencing some feelings of hurt, maybe some resentment, some other things that were going on. But it appeared stronger to her to be silent than it did to have the conversation about what she was truly feeling. And so, when you let someone know that they have hurt you, that's important for you. That's important for your process. It's not something that should be molded or what is the word that I want to use? It's not something that should be used against you. Because if we want authentic and real and whole relationships, we need to be able to say when something is bothering us. We need to be able to have time to have conversations of what hurts, right? And so the response from people tends to be why we don't do that, because their response is not always what we want. Sometimes it makes us feel worse. As my client said, if I say it, that makes me weak. And so I finally asked her, I said, well, where did you get that from? Where did you learn that you being able to say, you saying that you're hurt or that your feelings are hurt or that you're upset is weak? And she said, my mother. I said, okay. And we started to unpack some things with her relationship with her mother. But I also asked her, well, where did you get the silent treatment? When did you start using that? And she also said, my mother uses that. She used that when we were young, And I said, okay, your mom used that and you're using that. And I said, well, when your daughter gets upset, what does she choose to do? Does she lash out? And she said, no, she stops talking. And I said, so what's really happening is now you're passing along this method of coping that isn't helping anyone. And she kind of took a moment with that because she has no desire, right, to bring any harm to any of her children. And so that upset her a bit. And I can see that. And I wanted to help her understand that the point of bringing that up is not to cause her to feel like she had failed in the moment, but to understand that there are other ways to express how you feel, and you don't have to repeat the same cycles, the same things that you actually came to therapy for, right? Many of us come to therapy because of how we were, some of the relationships that we had or things that happened in our childhood or how we were parented or whatever the case may be. But then we start repeating some of the same things. And so we had to really take some time with helping her to see that particular process was allowing her to pass on poor communication skills. She would talk about the fact that she didn't like how her mother communicated or how her mother made her feel when she would communicate with her. She was passing on unhealthy coping skills. It's not it doesn't benefit anyone to engage in the silent treatment. Taking time to gather your thoughts, as I said before, is important, but silent treatment is a completely different animal. And so she's now passing on unhealthy coping skills. And then she is now passing on to her daughter some of the same impact that she had from her own mother. And those are some of the reasons she came to therapy in the first place, right? So that has been problematic, and that's causing more issue than she actually realized. And one of the things that came up in that dialogue is how much she wanted to be different from her mother. And so it would be a trigger for her for someone to say, you're acting just like your mom. You're doing things just like your mom. And so her having to face that in the moment was difficult for her. But what I want you all and the listeners to understand is some of these strategies that we have learned, right? Because we've observed them, they've been used on us, and they had an effect. Doesn't mean they were effective, but they've had some effect on us. They are causing the same issues that we're struggling with to occur in generations after us, right? And so the silent treatment is one of those strategies that many people use, and they typically use because they don't feel like they can communicate it effectively. They can't communicate their feelings effectively, or they can't really pull together exactly what they want to say in a way that they think will be received well. So they're concerned about how it's going to be taken. They've also learned that some of their feelings cause reactive responses from people. And so they're trying to avoid being hurt even more after they share their feelings, which starts to, bring about a feeling of rejection. I can't tell you how I feel because you're just going to get upset. We hear that often, right? I don't want to share how I feel because it's just going to be thrown up in my face later. And so we develop these habits of going silent. No sound, no communication, we just fall off the face of the earth for a couple of days and then come back. And some people come back and engage in a way to address what happened, but many don't come back and engage that particular issue. They don't, I won't say engage, but resolve that particular issue. It's just kind of come back as if nothing ever happened. And I want people to think about what that looks like, right? You've had this conflict, you've had this issue, and you come back, you've gone silent for several days, and then you come back as if nothing ever happened. And I think sometimes people who do that think that they don't have to share that bit of information. And while that's true, but the consequences of not working to resolve that is something that they're going to confront at some point, right? Because you utilizing silent treatment is a punishment. And then people aren't always sure why they're being punished because you've said nothing. And so that's where those thoughts of feeling unwanted or feeling not accepted, feeling as though people don't listen, feeling rejected, that leads to a lot of rejection. The silent treatment can really cause people, I'll say will cause people to feel rejected. When you love someone, you want to be able to work towards resolving a particular issue. However, it may be difficult, still doesn't mean it's impossible. And so the level of openness and healthy communication that is utilized will allow the relationship to develop in a way that you would like for it to develop. So my encouragement is to think about some of the strategies that you're using. How are you coping with negative emotions? How are you coping when someone has hurt your feelings? How are you coping? If you're using the silent treatment, let's figure out what the silent treatment is doing for you. What is the silent treatment truly doing for you? And be clear about that. Be honest about that. Just allows me to avoid, or it allows me to calm down. It allows me to people not to see my true emotions. I don't want to react, so I just get quiet. Well, that then highlights some other issues, right? It highlights I don't feel like I can control my emotions when I'm upset, or I don't feel like I'm heard when I'm upset, or I don't feel like people care when I'm upset. There are other things that are behind that particular coping strategy, and being able to pull that down and look behind the veil and see what that really is important. And I say that because the people that you are using silent treatment against are developing a narrative, which we talked about in the last episode. They're developing a narrative about themselves that are attached to your silent treatment. And so, there are many are going to say, well, that's not my issue. If it's a relationship that you value and someone that you care about, it is. It is. And we have to get back to the place of really not necessarily, we're not babying anyone's feelings, but if we're going to be in a relationship, if we're going to be in community, having conversations that allow healing to happen is important, right? It's important. We all feel justified in our own feelings and our own process and our own emotions. But at the end of the day, being able to resolve the issue, being able to have honest communication, and I use the resolve in the sense of at least being able to talk through things. Resolve doesn't mean agree, right? Resolve does not mean we agree with each other and have decided we're on one page. Sometimes resolve means I respect that we feel differently about this, but I don't feel differently about you. And being able to act accordingly to that, right? And so the silent treatment is one of those things that will cause others to feel rejected. And this particular client that I'm sharing, she really struggled with a mother wound. You often hear the father wound being talked about, but she struggled with a mother wound. And I actually want to go into the mother wound a little bit in the next episode, but I want you to take some time to really consider if this is your strategy, if this is your coping skill, why am I using it? What do I think I'm accomplishing? What effect is it truly happening? What effect is it truly having? And how can I shift that? How can I do something different to communicate? How can I deal with my emotions in a way that allow me to maintain healthy relationship? Okay. I want you to think about those things, journal that, write that out. And if you have some thoughts on this particular episode, connect with me on social media, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm on those spaces. You can also email me at faithlovetherapy@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you, and I will see you in the next episode.